Hey everybody, I'm Sorrel and this is Mark, who has just taken a sip of water, which is a good thing. And we are a couple, and this is Relationship Rebellion. And as usual at the beginning, I just want to say, if you are watching us, please let us know in the chat. And I shall repeat this later if I remember, because not everybody starts at the beginning. So today, we're going back to the 5 losing strategies, and we're going back to the first one. And the first of the 5 losing strategies is needing to be right. And I have made a little PDF guide. And if you would like to see it, it's I'm going to put a link in the chat. And you can download it from there. Anyway, so to come to needing to be right. Something went wrong. Never mind, something went wrong, but who cares? So we decided, Mark and me, after a very brief discussion, that there's at least 2 types of needing to be right. There may be more, but we've only given it about 5 minutes thought, haven't we? A bit more than that. And the first one, well, which one is the first one?
You need to be right, don't you, darling? She desperately needs to be right. And this fabulous personal growth is what has kept us together.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah, because that's about needing to think that you know all the answers and that what.
And my needing to take you seriously when you're being very, very right.
Absolutely. And I think we both identified that needing to be right is a bit of a boarding school thing too.
It's a screaming anxiety, trying to clamp a control on its world because it thinks it might have a body accident or something. I mean, it's just very, very anxious and needs to be jolly right, probably just before something horrible happens.
And also it's about proving yourself in some way, I think.
Like, see me and hear me. I hadn't been seen and heard.
Kind of, yeah, maybe. So in a relationship, it takes a form. Well, for me, it was with my ex when we had children who were quite small. It's like, oh, but I know more about raising children than you do because I have an MPhil in developmental psychology. So of course I know more than you do about it. It's like,
that's an academic arrogance.
It's a very academic arrogance. And even if you weren't an academic, even if you had nothing more than sort of GCSE level education, you could still have areas of your life where you kind of thought you knew more about this than your other half.
Well, you're trying to outclass each other on a point of action.
Yes.
Aren't you? You're trying to outclass each other so that the other party will submit to your wonderful righty rightness. Because that's what you need to feel good right now.
Absolutely.
And I'm entirely sure this happened to Fred Flintstone.
How did it happen to Fred Flintstone?
I don't know. He became Boris Johnson.
I see.
He had a hair bleach and then he went into politics.
Right.
And being right can get you quite a way, despite being totally wrong.
Well, is it a bit of a case of what you've called bullshit baffles brains?
Yes, it's a certain stance whereby if you're a chap and you're in the wrong, that's a very, very, very bad place.
Yes.
Full of punishment and hurties and whatnots and contempt and just general stuff. And we run the risk of ridicule. Nobody will take me seriously. And so we get really cross about that. And that is when we cling to that stance.
So then you have to prove that you're right.
Yes. Now, once you've realised that you're just a man and you can drop all the superhero know-it-all bollocks.
Yes.
You don't have to be right anymore.
And the other thing that can make it possible to decide you don't need to be right all the time is to realise that in a relationship, being right doesn't really get you anywhere.
No, it's a chilly space. I mean, actually, it's a place to be avoided, really, because it's repellent. Because to be in the right, you have to have somebody else being in the wrong. And that's no way to manage your friends, is it? It's just a bit nasty. Yeah. And so it's a dominant act, isn't it?
It is a dominant act.
Now, the question is just because it's clearly a bully trying to enslave another to their way of seeing things,
yeah,
is it always You'd still do it, wouldn't you?
Me?
To get me to take the trash out. It wouldn't bother you at all, would you?
Well, what could I possibly say that might make me seem right, that would make you take the trash out?
Well, your sexual favours.
That's not me, right?
A cuddle? Maybe a cup of tea?
I
Biscuit?
would definitely give you a cuddle and more when you took the trash out.
Yes. And
You
that's
see, I didn't say if, I said when.
I'm off. Yes, I mean this is the joy of relationships that are friendly. You see, one can. These are games, aren't they? The question is whether they hurt or not.
And that's the whole thing, isn't it?
With righteousness, righteousness is dodgy stuff.
So there's righteousness is the other aspect, isn't it? It's the other thing that we haven't mentioned yet is that righteous indignation. It's like, what you did to me was so wrong, and if you had been a halfway decent person, you wouldn't have done that. So you've talked to me about putting people in dysfunction.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is how you take control of their minds. It's nothing to it. Sorry, because you're also prideful, ego, and vulnerable, and don't want to be in the wrong.
Yes.
All I have to do is point out somewhere where you're in the jolly wrong, and then suddenly you're on the back foot, trying to get back into the right, probably because you were advancing upon me. See?
Yes.
So, all I have to do is challenge your stance in some honor, moral, or idealistic or factual way, and now I'm advancing on you.
And so it becomes sort of, it's like a boxing match.
That's exactly. And in that, the person who speaks last wins.
Oh,
so
yes.
you've got to have the last word.
Oh, yes, I've tried to give that up.
I know, but I just constantly lead you in there by shutting up and letting you hang out in the space.
I think you draw me in with some really devilish, I can't think of the word for it.
Ploy.
Something like that.
Yes.
Anyway, have we got off topic here?
Not really. What we're really trying to say is that if you're right, it's probably an accident because you're mainly wrong. And trying to introduce your rightness with a violent stance, emotional.
Why are you telling me I'm mostly wrong?
Is usually going to be a bad move because you're toxic, because that's why you're doing that stuff.
Yes.
People argue because they're toxic and they can't figure a better way out of it. Their higher functions have been locked off.
Possibly been doing this all their lives as well. And they've got, that whole thing about that neural pathway that's been used so many times.
Well, that's right. So if it's your default setting, then that's the setting one wants to look at. And if one is in the habit of losing one's temper, then you need to look at the quality of your temper and have a look at the safety catch and see what's ticking you off, because it'll probably be absolute nonsense after a little think about it.
That's often the case.
Because we take a tiny unit of data, right? And then we let it loose in our minds. And suddenly we've got the mini-series plus the sequel.
It's like planting a seed and it grows into a massive oak tree.
That's right. This is what your mate Sid Banks says. We make stuff up. And the reason we're so bloody angry and so fighty and so righteous is because we're constantly making up righteous stuff. Because we want to be righter than the other party so that we're in charge, because we're nicer than you and more proper. And it's madness.
Well, the other thing which really intrigues me is that you might think that you're right, and actually you might have good reason to think that you're right.
Well, actually, there are, yeah.
And even so, what is it? The kind of thing that occurred to me is that you're going to ask the question, yeah, but I am right, so what can I do about that? Because he's clearly doing something really fucking stupid, and I want, not you, somebody else, and I want to make sure he doesn't do that again.
Right, so yes.
So how do you, and I thought to myself, well, you don't really have to say anything, because it's that thing about when you've actually lived through that. I can't give a good example off the top of my head, and I wish I could. When you've lived through that bit of truth that you've realised you probably are right about, and you've brought it into your life and you've managed things through it, it's going to become obvious to the other person that that is the right way forward.
What we're talking about is agency here.
Yeah.
Because somebody over there has got an opinion on your stuff, and you're taking it seriously, for one. You're giving their opinion credence. For two, they might be full of fast food or something and not thinking clearly. You know,
They wouldn't be with me if they weren't
or
meat fast food.
you know, anything might be disturbing their rational mind.
Yes.
Because here's the thing: there is one way to know that you're right,
Yeah.
and that is that you're not violent, you're not malevolent, you're not deliberately wicked, you are not advancing, aggressive, dominant, denying, constantly repitching your point until the other person just gives in and lets you have your last worditis moment. And some people think that's triumph.
Yeah.
They don't realize that the entire world has gone, oh, you're a desperate nut. Best just to let you say your little thingy and then go and spit in your coffee. All right.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what they do.
Yeah.
You know, it kills love in your friends. And it certainly
does.
And it certainly fills your life with thoroughly objectionable people because you've made them that way by being totally right.
Well, nobody likes that in somebody else.
No, because it's dominant stance. Now, being right means, it kind of means style and grace, doesn't it? That's right. And dignity. Those things
All
are
of
right.
Those things, yeah.
Yes, it's never one particular perspective being foisted on another.
And in fact, if you think about it, most of the things we assume are right, they're just one perspective. And
out of 8 billion.
Quite. And if you're going to make a cake, you're not going to make it entirely out of flour, are you? You're going to chuck in some eggs and some sugar and some.
So this is a lovely metaphor. Yes, because when we talk about I don't know if I'm right or wrong, then join the club because everyone thinks that they might be right or wrong, but it's always a guess. And history tells us that. So the question is how much damage and hurt are you doing whilst you're holding this stance? And if it's a very, very costly stance, and if people are being hurt, wounded, damaged by your stance, you're probably not in the right.
Well, you're definitely not in the right, even if your information is somewhat correct. I mean, can I mix books? Because, because we're talking about Terry Real stuff here.
Yes.
And by the way, what we're talking about comes from this book, The New Rules of Marriage by Terence Real.
Well, I haven't read it, darling.
But I've read bits of it.
What we're really talking about is conflict resolution and how we get into them and how to get out of them. Yes.
But I also wanted to bring up the fact that when it comes to truths and realities and things, most of the time, we don't actually know what's true. So I was reading Quantum Psychology by Anton Wilson, and he has 2 statements. He says, mark them as either false, true, or maybe. And there's a whole bunch of statements, and the top 2 are Franklin Roosevelt was elected president in 1932. The second one is Franklin Roosevelt was elected president in 1933. I have no idea when Franklin Roosevelt was elected. So they're both maybes for me.
Yes.
And I don't particularly care when he was elected either. I mean, I'm willing to go with the fact that he was elected in the 1930s because I know that he brought in the New Deal in response to the Depression. But that's a piece of information that I've arrived at by deduction, not by knowing it to be true.
When you cross-reference it to your other data.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the point?
So the point is that most of the things that we believe to be true
are worked out.
Are maybes. Or they're worked out. And if they're worked out, they're probably just, what do you call it? A swag.
Scientific wild ass guess. Based on your last data download.
Yeah.
Which will be refreshed tomorrow.
Well, maybe based on some data downloads from 25 years ago. It doesn't really, but it's all in there, isn't it?
Well, the whole thing is when new information comes, we upgrade ourselves.
Then you upgrade. Well, hopefully you upgrade yourself. Well, yeah, I'm sure you do, darling.
Yes.
But some people don't.
Well, that's because they're locked into their... people are locked into winning. I'm personally locked into style. I'm less interested in winning than I am in playing well, because I find that playing well does tend to get me further.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
And playing well means playing well.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean fighting well. Even in fighting games, when I'm playing and not fighting, I do better.
Yep.
Because I have random interesting moves and everyone goes, what's he doing? And then after I've done that, it's all over.
Well, and to use another metaphor, there are no winners in a dance. Like, when I used to do Morris dancing.
So Disney she is.
So what with Morris dancing, there are no winners. Unless you want to win the prize for making the biggest blunder.
Soz. We're talking to these people about fighting in domestics, and you're getting all clever and taking it into folklore.
I know, but so
which is where lots of songs are about husbands killing their wives.
One of the things that I love about Terry Reel's work is that he talks about the dance between the two within the couple. So the moves and the stances they take, and how they kind of follow in this almost choreographed fashion, and they will usually lead to an end point, which somebody probably slams a door and walks out. Or
so, do you think it's a dance that they learn from their parents and are now dancing with each other?
Pretty much.
Yeah. So do I. So do I. So do I. So do I. Because all of our actions and all of our ideas and our things, we either inherit it from our maker, mum and dad, or alternatively, we actually choose a new one and get good enough at it to override a program, don't we?
And sometimes you go through that middle phase where you reject everything you learned from your parents and do the very opposite. And then that isn't particularly satisfactory either. And then you arrive at the new one that you
at the place of balance, in fact.
Yeah, or possibly just discovering that it's not just sort of one dimension, that there's other directions you can go in. I don't know how this looks on screen.
Nobody's
Sorry, can I interrupt? Is that okay? Just say, if anyone's watching this, please let us know in the comments. And I'm going to take another stab at putting in the link to the PDF I created with the 5 losing strategies in it. Yes, if you're watching, let us know. And if you want to download my little PDF, click on the link. And look, can you remember what you're going to say?
Absolutely not.
I'm so sorry, sweetheart.
Not at all.
I do this to you all the time.
Well, that's all right. It's entirely fine. It's fine. Yours is the expensive voice. Mine is the rude one.
No, yours is the expensive voice. Yes. Mine is the London drawl. No, drawl's the wrong word for London. And I'm
talking about the idea that you've read some bloody books, love, and actually help people heal their relationships and their heads and their hearts, whereas I just wobble through and take a giggle because I'm an artist and I'm not supposed to take these things seriously.
You are a bit a specialist in toxic male.
Yes, but that's only because I like them. It's not because I want to fix them.
Yes, but you still know quite a lot about them.
I do. Once they get past that sort of thing, they get all interesting.
Yeah.
And we're all toxic. You know, it's a place we all pass through. The question is what we do whilst we're there.
Yes.
And if you're toxic all the sodding time, everything that comes out of your mouth will be a right old joy kill. And it's about knowing that happens to everybody. And this is when I stopped taking arguments and insults and offences so seriously, because I realised that I was surrounded by nutters who weren't paying attention, had no idea how I was feeling fragile today. You know, and some days I can be offended and some days I can't be offended. And the world is just the same vulgar old place.
Nothing's changed. It's what's happening.
Nothing has changed. So this is about ownership of your own condition.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you do tend to not give your partners the benefit of your stance when it's not brilliant. And this is the whole problem for the next topic, which is emptying your mind at people that you love.
Actually, I think we'll find to consult the guru. The next one is controlling your partner. Next week, we will be talking about this idiocy of trying to control your partner.
Damn right.
I mean, how silly is that?
Well, actually, I have found that you can control your partner.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you do that?
Well, you just be exactly what they want.
And then?
And then they love you.
That's not controlling me.
It certainly jolly well is.
Not,
it certainly is. So you'll do anything to have someone who's nice to be with.
Jump to the gun.
It's just easy, isn't it?
You are trying to make me talk about controlling your partner a week to anyway. It won't be next week. It'll be the week after, because next week I will be with my lovely daughter. So, shall we go back to the issue of what to do when you're pretty sure that your way of doing things is probably a better way of doing things than your other half? Like, I mean, to use that classic case of a partner. I don't want to use sex-specific language here or gender-specific language, because it isn't always men and women, and it isn't always the men who are the bad guys, although it is usually. So let's just say one part of the couple. Hello, Harriet. Harriet's off screen here, and she's making me feel very nervous. Harriet can come on later when we start to run out of things to talk about. Yeah, so if your partner's the one who's saying you must eat every last grain of rice on your plate, Or you must eat that last little tiny bit of potato because there are starving children in India, which is, I think, my mother's line. And you're thinking, no, I don't think that's very clever. I don't want my children to get eating disorders. And also, you don't want a big fight at the dinner table because it kind of rather spoils our digestion. So it's how you go about dealing with that. And I think partly it's about approaching the subject with love and making sure that the relationship and obviously the welfare of the children are uppermost, and not the fact that I'm right and you're wrong. Does that make sense?
So, from the party who is being forced to eat the food that they're bored with.
That party is a third party.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there's the party giving it the old, you eat your supper because there's starving children in Africa.
Yeah.
What are we looking to happen here?
Oh, so then the other party is the one who says, I don't think that's that's not a good idea. Don't do that to the children.
Because they'll stop listening to you. Yes.
Well, for whatever reason. I mean, and it could be that you're sick and tired of there being arguments at the table and crying and people rushing off to their bedrooms.
Yes.
And so forth. And
so how do we make peace at the table?
So how do we make peace at the table, and how do we get closer to our other half whilst at the same time? And it's all kind of the same, part of the same thing, isn't it? And without making it seem like I'm right and you're wrong, because that's never a good stance.
Well, here is the situation where you need the third party, because they're both idiots. They can't do this. One of them has introduced war at the dining table.
Yeah.
And you never do that. That is absolutely bad manners, because it mucks up with people's digestion.
Yes.
And all civilized people know that when they're eating, that is a place of peace. This is how you make peace with animals. You turn around, I mean, that's why I'm not interested in you. It's a safe signal.
Yeah.
And so to actually create war at the dining table is a learned strategy.
Oh, it is a learned strategy. There's no doubt that person's parents did the same thing.
And actually, what's interesting is that everyone who's been to the dark arts college, all right, bad people, knows to attack when they're eating, because they have put their spiky gun things down and they're not ready for it.
That's what you're saying.
So if they're causing a war at the dining table, or if they're causing a war at daybreak, actually, any time that's difficult for you, if that's happening then, and there's a pattern of that, you need a therapist.
You think you need a therapist for someone who insists their children clean their plates?
I think that if that person creates war at the dining table, then they need to upgrade their skill sets.
Well, they definitely need to upgrade their skill sets, absolutely.
And if they're using emotional, vocal, or physical violence to achieve their objective, they are probably in the wrong. And laying down a program with those stressors causes, well, all the dietary screw-ups that we see around us, actually.
Can see all of that. So all I'm saying is, if, for the sake of argument, let's say it's a man who's insisting that they clean their plates, and it's the woman who's saying, don't do that to them, it's not healthy, and also you're causing a war at the dinner table.
Yes.
Before they get to the point where she says to him, I think you should see a therapist.
Yeah.
How could she address it without getting into this thing about needing to be right and needing to prove that he's wrong? Because we want to have a sort of peaceful.
We want to have a peaceful evolve.
Yeah.
And this is where the whole you don't know if you're right or wrong is so valuable.
Yeah.
Because if I don't know for sure that I'm right.
Yeah.
Okay. I can ask you a question.
You can.
I can ask you a question, and we can possibly discover the truth together. If your temper is triggered by my inquiry, then I will have to look at my style set, because I need to not trigger you.
Yes.
But also I must notice that you have a sensitivity over this matter. And at that point, I'll be thinking ACE, adverse child experiences, weirdness. And, when you hook up with someone and you're arguing about the kids around a table, not only are you arguing with him or her, you're arguing with their entire back catalogue of experience.
You are indeed.
That's why you're arguing.
That's a very good point.
So if we can't agree on this matter, it rather reveals our own lack of development.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been there, not knowing how to have a relationship and discover a workable truth.
Yeah.
Because I was locked in my own
Yeah.
history,
Yeah.
you know. And I've seen other people do exactly the same sort of thing. And this is the whole problem with right, is that no one's ever bloody right for long. All the medical science that we learned 300 years ago is barely relevant today, apart from leeches, which we still use.
Leeches,
Yeah, yay! You know, so everything always moves on.
Yes.
Everything always changes. Nothing is constant, not even the speed of light. So why should a man be constant? That's why we have to be so soft.
Yes.
And ready to adjust. It's when we stop wanting to adjust, we become solid, hard, immovable, and the clock starts to tick because you're not growing anymore. You've taken a stance.
And you're kind of solidifying, aren't you?
That's right.
Yeah, that I think that also brings in the notion of the importance of psychological flexibility.
Please, let's have some.
I mean, anyone who cannot change their perspective or consider another perspective, that there might be something in it,
will end up being a bit lonely, you see, because you're hard company. When people are hard company because they bloody know something and there's no argument, they become hard company. That's a hard head and it's a hard heart.
And they're hard to be with.
And they're hard to be with.
Yeah.
And they're held together by othering, not togethering.
That's also true.
So when you've got somebody who holds something together by othering, and that's the argument at the table.
It is the argument.
Them others over there, you.
I mean, the two partners are at war with each other.
Precisely.
And at least one of them is at war with the children.
And all it took was for one of them to put the other into dysfunction by saying, I think you're wrong.
Absolutely.
That's how it is. That's just that
bad. Yes.
That's it.
In fact, you've done both kinds of needing to be right there.
Yeah.
You said, my way is right and yours is wrong, and you are in the wrong.
Yeah. So
you put them in dysfunction whilst trying to prove
that's right. Now, you see, that's a fighting stance. You don't do that to people you love, right?
No, you should. No, you don't.
No, you don't. And at that point, you don't love them. Otherwise, you'd be using a better skill set.
Or if you still think that you love them, then you need to really seriously review what you're doing, because it's not loving behaviour.
Love.
And if they're behaving in a similar way towards you, then you've got a choice. You can actually have the conversation about, do we want to continue this relationship, and do we want to move forward into a better place, or is it time we ended it?
Well, this is clear communication.
Yes.
This is a clarity of communication. It might be new to that relationship of righteousness, because whilst they're both arguing about right and wrong, they're also both loathing each other. And that's the great secret. That's the funny bit. And that's why, and that's where, sorry, love, spending 40 years despising one another. That's a tragic cop out on joy.
It is sad, isn't it? Yeah. People who talk about their parents who still live together but really don't much like each other.
That's right. That's right. I was really interested in seeing a relationship that I considered I would like.
Yes.
And I didn't see one.
You didn't, did you?
No, I didn't see one. Every relationship I looked into, there's bitter, twisted, angry.
I do have some friends whose marriages I am impressed by, who clearly love each other and love spending time together, and did not find the empty nest syndrome anything of a problem at all. It's more like, oh, it's great, we've got some time to spend together now.
What a lovely story. What a gorgeous story.
But I could probably count them on less than the fingers of one hand. There may be more than that, because you don't always know what relationships are like. Sometimes on the surface they seem okay, but underneath,
they're psychos.
Well, possibly, yes. Wow, it's nearly time to go.
Nobody was listening.
We could say
anything we jolly well like.
Yes, but you mustn't forget that it goes out on Facebook.
I keep forgetting that.
And then it goes on YouTube.
See?
YouTube. It's there.
I'm so glad I kept my trousers on.
Nobody can tell you haven't.
Did you swear?
At least once.
Thank goodness, neither did I. You did?
I did.
Gosh, see, look at that.
I did, yes, absolutely. Right then. I think it's about time we
thank you so much
goodbye to
all of you.
People.
Thank you very much for sharing your time. And it was fun. And we might say something clever next time.
You never know. But that was Harriet. Harriet's come to say goodbye to
She's
you.
blah, 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 blah. We were so intelligent, we didn't need you. Whoa, you didn't. Bye.
Bye.